Hello, greetings. This is Sherwyn Green's channel, and I am David Garnett, and I am standing in for Sherwyn again. And I am doing my ranking of all the Jethro Tull albums, unless I've missed any of them out by accident. I wrote a list and I can't find it, so I've written another one very quickly from memory, and here it is on a piece of paper. Now, starting at the bottom, I have to say that these are all wonderful albums. I like all of them. I don't hate any of them. I rank some more highly than the others, but that changes quite frequently. And here we have it. The lowest one is, why you're asking, but it's the Christmas album. I always thought that Christmas music should be easy to get so you can relax and eat your turkey or Christmas pudding or whatever, and gaze at the tree or the usual comedy shows on the TV or the singing in the churches. Yes. That's a bit difficult to do with this one. I tend to put Cliff at Christmas or Elvis Sings Christmas on at Christmas, but it's still a good album, and it's taken a few listens to enjoy it. I didn't like the different versions of earlier songs on it very much. I like them now, more recently. I thought they were inferior versions at first, but now I like them. The whole album has a genuine feel to it. It just has that sting in the tail, the critique of Christmas, the questioning of Christmas, and so on. Right, that's my bottom one. And the next one up is .com. Yes, I think there are some great tracks on this album. Spiral's great, the title track's great, especially the female vocals. Not only that, but the music too. And also Far Alaska, I like Far Alaska. Black Mamba's probably my favourite track of it. And what else is on it? I like the finale track, reminds me of Songs from a Wood. And it's a nice love song, which is very rare in the Jethro Tull canon, about some lover, perhaps Ian Anderson's wife, pressing some roses to her bosom. And it's well worth it. I don't like the Wicked Windows track. It took me a while to find out what it was about, through reading and watching YouTube videos. But when it turned out to be about Heinrich Himmler, put me right off. But still a good album, great music, great songs. And the next one is a tie between three of them. When I can't rank them above one another, I put them in as a tie. And this is Zealot Gene, the second to the last offering from the band, or the new band. Crest of a Knave, the famous or infamous Grammy winner, whichever way you look at it, and Stand Up, the UK #1 from 1969. There's some brilliant material on these, but I think there's some weak spots compared with a great many of the other albums. Stand Up has the great band, the great early band with Clive Bunker on the drums and Glenn Cornick on bass, as well as the new foundling Martin Barr starting to flex his wings. Crest of a Knave is mainly Dave Pegg, Ian Anderson and Martin Barr, sounding as though they're constructing an album, but there's some great music in it. Mountain Men's my favourite track, especially with the semi-spoken introduction to the rest, to the sort of main prog song, I suppose. I also love The one about the town. What's it called? I don't know, but it's supposedly the archetypal Tull track, and it is very good. It sings about this waitress's legs going on forever, like staring up at infinity. Budapest, it's called. Budapest. I thought it should be called Hot Night in Budapest, but it's not my place to say. Anyway, and Zealot Jean, a great comeback for the new band, Ian Anderson's solo band, dubbing themselves Jethro Tull, coming up with worthy conceptual work. Zealot Jean, which is mostly Ian playing his acoustic guitar, harmonica and flute. It has Florian Opeth on guitar, good young guitarist. He is overshadowed by the presence of, in the past, of Martin Barre, of course, with kind of like a giant light bulb compared to the rather smaller Aladdin's lamp of Florian Opeth, whatever his name is. And with another Hammond on drums, very good on the drums. The great Dave Goodyear on bass, and Ian O'Hara. Is it Ian O'Hara? It's called O'Hara. On keyboards. Immensely talented musicians. And I remember O'Hara. Is it John or Ian O'Hara? Anyway, I remember he was in Blackpool, England, providing backing musical direction for the Who's Quadrophenia show, which was made into a kind of musical stage play. And I thought it was rather good, what he did with it. Now, the next one I've got is Roots to Branches, regarded as a great comeback for the band, with Dave Pegg still in, Martin Barre, of course, who was on it in it until, what, 2012, I think it was, maybe before that. Perhaps it was before that. And Dome Purry, great drummer, Dome Purry. One of the great drummers that the band has been graced with. And some Middle Eastern or Far Eastern sounds with the rock music. Good electric album. Roots to Branches, referring to certain spiritual realities concerning all the religious traditions. That's a great record. And the next one up, I've got Broadsword and the Beast, which is a very polished, engineered, produced album in which Robin Black was involved, who was the Yardbirds producer or engineer, forget which, or both, and also other great artists since then. So, Broadsword and the Beast, fantastic opening track, great use of synthesizers. Not that the band didn't use synthesizers before the 80s, they did, but they didn't use them in the same way as they did in the 80s because of the progression of popular music, meaning the use of synth in what was called synth pop. And Jethro Tull made a nod in that direction on a couple of albums, 2 or 3 albums perhaps. Oh, the next one is Minstrel in the Gallery. This is quite often in the top few of other people's rankings, and it's a great record. I think it's a slightly over acoustic record, which is in keeping with the kind of loose concept that seemed to have developed during the writing and recording of the album. Is that how concept albums always develop? Perhaps they do. I think they probably do. And The album, of course, includes Ian Anderson being the minstrel, like the medieval minstrel, but he's on his own. He's going through some personal crisis, and the entire band being his troupe of players. So we have medieval minstrel, and there aren't any recordings of theirs, and no written music that I'm aware of, because Guido didn't start writing music till later. But now we have recordings of the modern medieval minstrel. We've got Bob Dylan, we've got John Lennon, all the guys, and of course Ian Anderson and Jethro Tull, posing a problematic counterpart to those, or counterpoint to those. Now, after Minstrel in the gallery, we have got Benefit, beautiful flowing prog album with Clive Bunker on the drums and Glenn Cornick still on the bass from the very early days of the band, and Martin Barr's second album, and it sounds as though he's improved quite a lot after stand-up, and some great writing from Ian Anderson. Includes a great heavy rocker, To Cry You a Song, my favourite track, Time for Everything. Just a brilliantly constructed, performed song, great lyrics, and there's a great closer, Society, You're a Woman. So Benefit is definitely recommended. It's Pete Pardo's #1 of Sea of Tranquility, and I can see where he's coming from there. But anyway, Benefit. Next one is let's see what I've written. Yes, Stormwatch, the third in the so-called folk rock trilogy, featuring the great David Palmer, veteran of the Royal Academy of Music, providing the same sort of presence, I suppose, before 1976, 7, before 1977 or 76, as George Martin provided to the Beatles in the 60s, in that he brought this classical element in. He did the string arrangements to start with, another arrangement like horn arrangements, and I don't know how much of a helping hand he gave, but when he joined the band from the song for the Songs from the Wood album, and probably before that on tour, it changed Jethro Tull. There was an added bonus, if you like, which was very interesting. And that's one thing about Jethro Tull that you can depend on. Everything's very interesting, and there's never a dull moment. Now, Stormwatch. This gets criticised, but I think it's a great rock album with also great gentle songs. I like the song Home, and of course it has the fan favourite Dark Ages, which you'll find more than 2 versions of, I think, if you ferret around on the internet enough. Now, the next one is, surprisingly, Rock Island. Now, this album I have defended in another video. It's a great record, it hangs together very nicely. There's some great musicianship on it. My favourite song is Whaler's Due. The middle bit is the instrumental bit in the middle, which starts off with the soft bass, rising, climbing bass, and then the guitar adds weight, and there are flute and guitar solos interspersed, which is one of the things distinctive things about Jethro Tull that everyone should love. If they don't, I think they're listening to the wrong band. And Martin Barr and David Pegg on bass, and the flute playing of Ian, of course, is great. And it's a great song. It's I don't know if it's deliberately an opposite to Don't Kill the Whale by Yes earlier. Probably about, I don't know, 10 years earlier. Yes recorded a song called Don't Kill the Whale, which is understandable. Yes, it's very good. Conservation and compassion. But Whalers' Dues is more from the whaler's point of view, that this guy has to make a living. He's got a wife. The character in the song has a wife and children. And, you know, you have to weigh up both sides, I think, before you start making restrictive rules about whale hunting or any other human action. Now, let's see now, what's the next one? Next one, I've got War Child, which, interestingly, was a kind of last stage of a great musical project, which started with the Chateau des Astatates, which the band made in 72 or 73 in France, in this Chateau de la Ville, attempting to make this concept album. I don't know how definite the concept was at the time. The songs tend to the band's Ian Anderson sings about creation and evolution and humanity being sort of beset in its environment, and but the whole thing, the whole human world being a play which is controlled by God as the director of the play. But anyway, from those sessions came much of the music for the Passion Play album, which in which there was a shift of concept to one particular individual, Ronnie Pilgrim, within the play. And I have to stress that the Chateau des Astatates weren't available at the time, so a Passion Play tended to be a bit puzzling in various ways. Anyway, I'll come to that one later. And the War Child album retains the theme of man's behaviour being partly determined by the trends of animal evolution, the instincts of animals, and so on and so forth. That theme is in War Child, but it's much looser album, but it's great. I love the use of piano accordion in it. And I think my favourite track is probably the third Hurrah, in which the theme of War Child is repeated from the first track, but in a different tenor, from a kind of lounge blues tenor to a prog rock tenor. Now, the famous song on it is also great, Skating Away on the Thin Ice of a New Day, wonderful song. And also I like Bungle in the Jungle. It's my favourite Tull single. It was a great hit single. I like it even more than Living in the Past, most of the time anyway. Now, let's see, what's the next one? I've got Under Wraps. Well, most people put this at the bottom of the pile simply because there isn't a real drummer on it. I don't think that's necessary. Although there isn't a real drummer on it, would they know if it wasn't on the sleeve? Okay, so there's a rather annoying loud snare drum sometimes, but apart from that, I think the drums sound okay. And then I think, well, I probably would have noticed after the first couple of listens. And would it be better with a live drummer? Yes. But the songs are really great. They're all focused on certain emotions and situations, social situations. So, Under Wraps, I'm Loading as a great record. And should they re-record it with a real drummer? Or even just insert a real drummer into the mix? I'll rush and buy it. Yes. Now, Under Wraps. This was his next. This was the debut album. Yeah, perhaps it's an underrated debut album. It's a cut above even the greater debut albums, the so-called greater debut albums, than this. It's a cut above them to an extent because there's much more of an intelligent musical knowledge at play in it, as well as good humour and not over arrogance, which you get with some, especially with rock musicians. And it's that great band, a great early band, but not with Martin Barr, with Mick Abrahams, who was a great blues player. And this is indeed the blues album, but it's not like the usual blues album by B.B. King or, whoever, Big Bill Broomsey or whoever. It's more an exercise in the blues and developing a style, the style of the band itself, which is essentially a progressive style. And for me, although this isn't known as a prog rock album, it is a progressive album, especially from the time that it was done, 1968. And you've got blues rock, there's folk rock, there's even the Chicago blues tenor or style in it, and there's jazz blues, the Rolling Cake, and then you have on the second half of it there's more hybrid styles, like the Cream did when they were recording, Ginger Baker, Jack Bruce and Eric Clapton. And in fact there is a version of Cat Squirrel which is totally different from the Cream one, which is on the Cream's first album. It's entirely different to the Jethro Tull version of it, and I've listened to them one after the other and enjoyed the experience, because the take that this band has on Cat Squirrel, which is a great instrumental, blues rock instrumental, and the take that the Cream had, well, you notice the difference and enjoy both just as much. Right, now the next one is, what have I got next? I've got the most recent album by Jethro Tull, RokFlote, which has Joe Parrish on guitar, and he's much more of a light bulb than the last guy. And also Hammond's still on the drums, and Ian Anderson's vocals. They've been criticised because they're so different from his early vocals. I think he still does a great job. He's bang on the note, especially on this album. And it's a beautifully realised concept album. There's composed classical music on it, not established classical music, but written by the band. And as well as the rock music is great. The concept of the gods, the Norse gods, and kind of how they manifest in modern life, all framed with this female narrator who gives us the wonderful sounding old Icelandic language from the poetic Edda, all about the gods and how they, at the end of time, the Ragnarok, they retire to Ithaval, which is a kind of place of rest and healing. Great writing, great music. My favourite track? Probably the wolf one. Yeah, one about the wolf. I forget what it's called exactly. No, it's about a wolf. And the next one up from there is the wonderful A Passion Play album, which quite often gets cited as a #1 by fans and critics. I have some other albums that I like more. And I've just put an oblique stroke next to that and written the Chateau Disaster tapes, because they've recently become all available, and you can get them on the Nightcap album, or most of them, I think, on the Nightcap album, one of the issues of the Nightcap album, and it's really worth a listen. And also, if you look on YouTube, you find some Steve Buckley mixes and what amount to musical arrangements, I think, of tapes from those sessions. There's one called Chateau Suite, which I really enjoyed. I thought it was great, and some great songs. And it's not a repeat of the Passion Play album, or vice versa. Now, the Passion Play album, controversial. It was controversial at the time. It was slagged by music critics. And I must admit, when I first heard it, I found it difficult to appreciate the starting and stopping. I wasn't used to. Since then, of course, there's been starty-stoppy music galore from both sides of the Atlantic and from Europe, and so it's more easy to get now than it was then. And I do like the story of the hare who lost his spectacles, which forms a kind of interval, with it being one long song. And I recommend the 2006, early 2000s remaster rather, the early 2000s remaster above the Stephen Wilson remix, because although he usually does a good job, I think that the remaster is a bit better than his remix of Passion Play, which I'm not surprised, because it must have been a very difficult job remixing an album like that. So, story of Ronnie Pilgrim. Ronnie Pilgrim, not Ronnie Lomas, that's another one. That's Ray Lomas, that's another one. Ronnie Pilgrim and his journey in the afterlife through various dimensions and pertaining to the world. And he survives the car crash at the end. And he takes up his place in the huge Passion Play again, instead of his own little Passion Play. Right. Passion Play, what's the next one? Oh, yes. Oh, yes. The next one is, a surprise, it's the re-recorded for TV special Too Old to Rock and Roll, Too Young to Die album, remixed by Stephen Wilson to stereo. And I've included this because the original release of Too Old to Rock and Roll, I was very disappointed by. I loved the songs, but I thought that the instrumentation, the backing track, if you like, to the vocals, were sadly lacking at the time, and couldn't hear things clearly. It might be my equipment, I don't know. And but this re-recording is much better. It's big and bright. David Palmer's orchestral arrangements are terrific, and his sax solo on Deadbeat to an Old Greaser. The entire band is more on fire on this one. They sound much more enthusiastic. Maybe the heart wasn't in the original recording, but this performance is great. So I've not ranked the the first release of Too Old to Rock and Roll, Too Young to Die, because it'd probably come at the bottom of the list, or maybe just above the Christmas album. I don't know. Now, but I've got it above the beloved Passion Play album. Now, that's the next one. The next one is the A album, in which there's a new lineup after the classic 70s lineup. And this will, a lot of people won't agree with this. I think most people that I've seen their video, they've seen the videos of regards Jethro Tull, put all the 70s albums above all the rest, but and stand up from the 60s as well. But this A album is, for me, it's one of the very best ones. I know it's not got John Evan on it, but it's got Eddie Jobson on it, an entirely different kettle of fish. As kind of added bonus, Eddie Jobson, famous for his Frank Zappa concerts, and which you'll find on At the Roxy and Elsewhere live album, and famous for his role in Roxy Music in the 70s, and also the UK band called the UK, which I think he was a founding member of. And he does a great performance on this Tull record, which is a great jazz fusion rock album. It's a progressive rock album. Who cares? Right. The next one up is Aqualung. This is most people's favourite, I think, and number one, in view of its huge selling. But also because there isn't a weak track on it, as Martin Barr, the guitarist, said in the paper, and since then everyone's been saying the same thing in their videos and probably in print in various journals and books. And it's true, they're all great tracks. Every one of them's a gem, obviously very carefully recorded, and I know something about the history of it. It was a very difficult album to make, and it's not a concept album, also it's being claimed by the band. I'm not sure whether it is one or not myself, but certainly the first side centres on the tramp character, and then there's Interspace, personal songs from Ian Anderson, and there's a kind of theatrical connection there because he used to, as I understand, as it were, pretend to be a tramp when he played some initial gigs earlier in London, perhaps before they made the first album. He would push his way through the audience, jump up on stage with his scruffy-looking coat that his father gave him, and stand on one leg, play the harmonica, as though some tramp had got up to join the band and started playing. I don't know, it's kind of image theatrical thing, and perhaps, I don't know, maybe he feared that he'd become a homeless person when he was living in, where was it? Kentish Town, maybe? I don't know. But he was working in a cinema as a cleaner, apparently. I might be wrong. Perhaps that was one scenario. If the band didn't take off, or bands didn't take off, he might end up having to be a bit of a tramp himself. Now, the reason I've got Aqualung above A, because on the whole it's about as good a record, is because I think the Slipstream song, which for me forms a linchpin for the entire record, and it's just a little acoustic-led song in which he sings, "When the lush separation enfolds you and the products of wealth push you along on the bow wave of your spiritless undying selves, and you press on God's way to your last dime as he hands you the bill, and you spin in the slipstream, timeless, unreasoning, paddle right out of the mess, or is it travel right out of the mess? Paddle or travel makes no difference. But for me, that is a great deep concept, if it can be called a concept. Perhaps it's not a concept. Seems to me that Jethro Tull has always been against concepts, and it's outside restrictive critics that perceive the concepts, in the first place. Like terms and concepts, for me, as far as I understand it, go out the window. But I've got 3 albums above that one, and the next 2 I've ranked together. Heavy Horses and Thick as a Brick, entirely different records. But Thick as a Brick we'll show them a concept album. In other words, they started to take the mickey out of the concept album genre. Some people keep saying that this is a spoof of prog. It's not a spoof of prog. It's a spoof of the concept album genre. It's a progressive rock album, and in fact, it's an attempt, perhaps, at coming a bit closer to the to what might call the classic prog rock bands like Yes and who else? Genesis, for example, and of course, Thick as a Brick is just one long song, which fades out at the end of. Or fizzles out more at the end of the first half, and then comes back in. Slightly changed, same notation, I think, but slightly changed the use of different instruments at the beginning of the second half. So, got Thick as a Brick there. It's also got serious singing in it as well. There's no lack of humour though. And I enjoy particularly the medieval scene of the son and the father. And the son is away and the father, and there's a rival between them, and it has to do with this medieval castle. And it's an entire kind of medieval scene with the English social classes, and of course, one calls to mind that the humorous element of it is that people used to say, probably still do. An Englishman's home is his castle, and the father would sit there, even if he was a worker, he would sit there with his braces dangling and bark orders at everybody else, and their little pecking order sitting in whoever's chair, and if you sat in your big brother's chair, he would kick you out of it, and all that. So, Thick as a Brick. And Heavy Horses, entirely different. This is an album in which Ian Anderson comes close to the English poets, and it's known as the A.E. Houseman album, but I think of it more as a Vaughan Williams meets Elvis Presley and Has a Baby album. And yeah, there's great songs on that, beautiful songs with some of the animals and scenes from the dwindling countryside, the horses in question, the Shire horses, so-called Shire horses. And the box set, I recommend get the box set of this, because if nothing else, well, you get a lot, but one thing that I particularly loved is little pictures like those. You used to get bird life booklets with bird life in, and this is all the different Shire horses, quite a lot of, I didn't count them up, but of different breeds of Shire horse. So there we have it. Heavy Horses, and there's a serious classical music going on in there as well, Allah, and thanks to David Palmer. But number 1, it wasn't my number 1 in the ranking of the top 10 Jethro Tull before, but I've changed my mind, and the top few get swapped on. In fact, the whole all of my list is swappable, roundable throughout, but depending on which one I'm listening to at the time, or which one I fancy listening to, even if I can't. But the top one is, of course, Songs from the Wood from 1976. Is it? No, 1977. Songs from the Wood from 1977. And it's the Stephen Wilson remix that I'm preferring here with the bonus tracks, because the bonus tracks allow for an expansion of the concept. And Songs from the Wood being, of course, the writer and composer, his position outside human society and looking in on it, and also recommending the English countryside, a la the English poets again, Wordsworth and Ted Hughes and Gerard Hopkins and all the English mystics who used to channel through the English countryside all the forces of nature and the intelligence behind nature. And and the music is just exquisite, and the performances are great. You've got John Glasscock on bass guitar, his second album with the band, one of the greatest bass guitarists ever of all time. Martin Barr, of course, one of the great guitarists. Barrymore Barlow, probably the most acclaimed drummer of Jethro Tull. You've got John Evan still on keyboard, and David Palmer on keyboards as well. It was his first outing with the band as a regular member in terms of studio recordings. And you've got, is there anyone else? Yeah, of course, there's Ian Anderson, flute, vocals, and acoustic guitar. The songs are great. Songs from the song. Let me bring you songs from the wood to make him feel much better than you could know. And that's exactly what he does. So, there. Get the bonus track, Oldies Is Die Hard, which has the Dark Ages theme in it. But it's got to be one of the best records they ever made. And that's the first of the bonus tracks on this release. So, now, any recommendations? Well, live albums bursting out, and from the early band, the Isle of Wight CD, and compilations, Famous Living in the Past compilation, Nightcap again, of course, various issues of Nightcap. There were a couple of albums, LPs, MU, The Best of Jethro Tull, Volume 1 and Volume 2. They're worth a listen. Oh, there are lots of compilations. Compilations are worth a listen. It's a bit difficult to get the singles all in one place. I'd like to see a singles album, but it's not the way of the band to just do kind of stock releases like that, as far as I understand it. Though I dare say this may happen in the future. Right. So, countdown from number 1. Number 1, their finest album, Songs from the Wood. Followed by number 2, Joint, Heavy Horses and Thick as a Brick. Number 3, Aqualung. Number 4, A. Number 5, the re-recording of Too Old to Rock and Roll, Too Young to Die. And number 6, A Passion Play with the Chateau Disaster tapes thrown in, if you can get a copy. And next, RokFlote. Number 8, This Was. Then Under Wraps. Number 10, War Child. 11, Rock Island. 12, Stormwatch. 13 Benefit, 14 Minstrel in the Gallery, 15 Broadside and the Beast, 16 Roots to Branches, and then there's a tie, Zealot Jean, Crest of a Knave, and Stand Up. And then I've got, I don't know if I mentioned this one, Catfish Rising. I might not have mentioned that one. That's a great, mostly blues rock, folk blues rock album, with the prog that the band are capable of, and do so well. Next one, .com. Sorry, after Roots to Branches, we've got Zealot Jean, Crest of a Knave, and Stand Up, tied. Then there's Catfish Rising, .com, so there's great songs on that, and the famous but in a way problematic Christmas album, and I hope I've covered them all. There we have it, my ranking of the Jethro Tull albums. You could reach into your Amazon website or your eBay, or go to your record shop and get any of these albums, and I challenge you to not enjoy them. I'm sure you will. And so, I can recommend a recent live release called Skating on Thin Ice, which is from the Songs from the Wood tour, or the tour during which Songs from the Wood, the album, was released. It was released mid-tour. So, there we have it. And now I can stop the tape. Bye-bye.